you think the developers have someone in their studio whose only job is to review my videos to see if there's anything in there that needs to be immediately changed? I mean, we've seen them change like some codes, for example, when I reported on it. So, developers, hi, if you're watching, please change some things in sandbox mode based on this video, because from what I've seen, some people have said, yeah, sandbox mode is alright, but there are some features that the people had expected from admin mode and some sandbox mode features which are still not in the game yet. So I'm just going to go over the ones that people have said that should be in sandbox mode or admin mode, and developers should totally add them. And the first one that I've always constantly been seen being mentioned is a game mode editor, because currently right now you can't edit game mode statistics. So for example, you can't change the amount of waves that a game mode has, you can't change the amount of enemies that spawn in the game mode, you can't change the spawn delay of enemies in that game mode, you can't change the skip timer, you can't change the timer in of itself, and you can't modify the enemies that spawn within a game mode. Now, one of the features that Below Natural had actually promised in admin mode was a game mode editor or a game mode builder. So for example, if you wanted to do some sort of boss rush feature, so if you get like the Brute, the Patient Zero, the Gravedigger, the Molten Warlord, and the Fallen King, for example, at the end of a random game mode, and just allow these to be played by your friends within that certain server, then that would be very cool. However, the developers do not allow this. Yes, you can spawn in these enemies through the admin UI, so I can easily spawn in the Brew, which still has this broken icon, by the way. Why does it still have the cat icon after all these years? Well, months, really. But you have to spawn these enemies in individually. You can't edit, for example, the game mode statistics to say, yes, I want this to be changed, so this and this and this enemy can spawn in. And this is the main gripe that people have with admin mode, because this was one of the features that Below Natural had been talking about prior to the release of admin mode. However, this has not been implemented yet. People have said that this is actually a feature that was promised in the admin mode Game Pass. I believe they're referring to full game control, edit and customize everything. You can't customize game modes. Yeah, sure, you can customize which game mode you can play, but you can't customize the game mode itself. Another thing that people want to see is the Legacy Hidden Wave being re-added. Now, this was removed for an odd reason. In fact, I don't even know what the reason is, and I can't even speculate what the reason is, because all, and if not all of the enemies, most of the enemies seen in Legacy Hidden Wave, not really that secret. I mean, they did work actually, and the only enemies missing were the developer enemies from way back when, which I would only assume were removed because those developers weren't in the game anymore. So if it was an issue with the developers being in the original Legacy Hidden Wave, they weren't in the added Hidden Wave anyway, so what's the point? I don't know why it was removed. Should it be re-added back? Probably. I don't know if it should be its own separate game mode, or if it should be applied at the end of Fallen mode if you beat the game mode in 16 minutes and 49 seconds. I mean, it was a weird requirement after the overall update anyway, so I'm not sure if that should be re-added, but it should at least be in the game, and the enemies in the Legacy Hidden Wave should be re-added. And speaking of Hidden Wave, the Hidden Wave should actually work. Yeah, there's an option to enable Hidden Wave, which should be applied after you beat Fallen mode. However, this is not the case. You can't actually activate the Hidden Wave, even if you do the requirements. You can't even do the 1009 activation in Sandbox mode. This should be working, because, I mean, it even says Hidden Wave enable doesn't work. One annoying thing about admin mode is that, as you can see here, I have a base health of this amount, and I do have a limited amount of cash, so if I place down a Swarmer, I can't place down another Swarmer. Even though my admin UI here says God mode is on and infinite money is on. This is because if you swap between game modes, these changes don't automatically apply over. So I have to re-enable and disable God mode to get the infinite health, and then do the same for infinite cash. I mean, yeah, it's easily accessible, but I just don't like it. It should follow the UI that's said here. In a similar-ish vein, the timescales here in the UI here is more liberal than the timescales seen in here. So here, I believe you can't get any higher than 1000-ish. Or can you? Well, yeah, you can actually get a high amount of timescale here, but you can't enable the timescale here. And in fact, having such a high amount of timescale actually breaks the game. As you can see, I had to reset it down to 1 to actually get all these enemies to spawn in. I mean, I don't know if a timescale of 1000 is actually beneficial, so perhaps update this to only go up to 100 like it is in the admin UI here. But in a similar vein, consumable cooldowns in admin mode are always disabled, even if you have it enabled here. So, okay, if I have consumable cooldowns enabled, and then throw this, does it work? yeah, I can use multiple consumables to my heart's content, even though consumable cooldowns are enabled as seen here. I mean, sure, people are probably using admin mode to disable consumable cooldowns. However, some people want to play the game properly, and this is just not possible in sandbox mode currently in regards to consumables. Another thing is that challenge maps are somewhat broken. So if I were to enable Juggernaut, for example, and see this play out, no enemies spawn in Juggernaut. What about jail towers? No enemies are spawning into jail towers. I don't know why. It works in some challenge maps. So, for example, Legion. I believe the enemies do spawn in Legion. Or not. What's going on? Why aren't the enemies spawning in? What's going on? Okay, for some reason, I have broken the game mode where enemies can't spawn in. What I was meant to show is that in jail towers, as this game mode is, the challenge is, you can see that it's spawning in normals, even though the game mode or the challenge is actually not meant to spawn in normals. This is for some reason using the intermediate wave structure initially before changing over into fallen. Why has it done this? That's really odd. Now this has been an issue since admin mode was first added. So as you can see, this is classic candy cane lane. You can see that these enemies here, they actually are following intermediate mode waves, even though it does have its own proper wave structure in the event. This is all to say that the current challenge maps are a bit jank and a bit broken. Also, this map is meant to corrupt, but it doesn't. And, well, the classic maps, the event maps, they're also meant to have tickets that spin, but they obviously don't spin anymore. I don't know if this should be implemented because, well, you can't get the ticks badge anymore, but surely they'd be like spin, you know? Also, this abnormal or this intermediate wave structure also applies for challenge maps when enabled through here. So you can see these special game modes, they have the intermediate wave structure. So if I were to also use like Polluted Wastelands 2, I can't actually spawn in the nuclear monster in Polluted Wastelands 2. I can only spawn in intermediate mode enemies. Again, a severe issue if you're trying to, you know, attempt to beat solo Polluted Wastelands 2 in admin mode before trying it in the real game. You know, testing out your skills before actually trying it, but it doesn't work. Why are these normals wearing Badlands? Badlands isn't enabled here. What's going on? Next, a feature that people want enabled is allowing to swap between skins that you own in admin mode. Because currently, I can place down the scout and it'll have the skin I currently have, well, if I timescale to 1, it'll have the skin that I currently have it applied to it in the main lobby, that being the bunny scout. But I can't change it over into another scout skin while in admin mode. I had to go back into the normal game to do that. Most people would prefer to change their skins in this admin mode UI here. Now, I'm not saying that all players with the admin mode game pass should be allowed to have all the skins in Tower Defense Simulator to use. I'm not saying that, because that would mean that skins effectively would be pointless for people with the admin mode game pass. I mean, sure, you can't use it in the regular game, but having it in admin mode is good enough. But there should be a system where you should be able to swap between the current skins that you own in admin mode and not going into the main game for that. In a similar vein, I want there to be a system where you can actually change the skins for these units that you can spawn in. For example, the Executioner Skeleton, it has a skin for, say, the Duck Necromancer, but you can't change it to be like that. You can only have it the default version. Similar for the Field Medic, there is a Dark Frost skin or Frost skin for the Mercenary base, but you can't change the Field Medic skin to represent that. Same for the Goons, you can't do that. And also developers, alongside fixing the icons for the Brute and the Dummy Boss, fix the icon for the Molten Monster. Additionally, while you're at it, there's only the Gunner APC that you can spawn in. There is no Rocket APC that you can spawn in. Now, some people want to be able to spawn in the Mecha Base units, the Mark 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. However, I'm not so sure about that, given the fact that the Mecha Base, you can't even use it as a regular tower, and I don't think the developers are up for using admin mode stuff in Sandbox. So then again, they do have the Molten Monster, but not the regular monster. But I totally think that the consumable enemies, so for example, the Fire Ducky, Confusion Ducky, Ice Ducky, Poison Ducky, and Shock Ducky, should be able to be spawned in through the unit system here. And yes, you have the immobile units, for example, the Ice Turret, Sunflower, Ivy, Nightshade, and the Engineer Sentries, which could be able to be spawned in. But with the way that this unit system works, it would have to go into the path, and that's a bit jank. Speaking of which, golden perks. Yeah, I can enable them, I can disable them, but it means absolutely jack shit in admin mode. You only have it enabled or disabled if you have it enabled or disabled in the lobby. There is no free changing of whether you can have golden perks or not. Now, it should totally be a system, because I assume anyone with level 250 probably does have the golden skins. Additionally, for enemy modifiers, we are actually missing 2 modifiers. We're missing Tank, and we're also missing Nimble. I mean, furthermore, we're also missing No Explosion, and given the fact that there are enemies that we can now spawn in that have no explosion, for example, the Gold Titan we can spawn in and it has no explosion immunity, if I could hover over it, that is. Actually, let me just spawn in a Golden and just hover over that one. you can actually see that it has no explosion immunity. Should be enabled, really. Another thing that people want added is event maps. Now, for some reason, there are certain event maps that have been re-added. For example, Rotfield has been re-added to here. And for a time, Cold Ambush, the Christmas 2022 or 2023 event map, was added to Tower Defense Simulator's admin mode. However, that was removed because it was broken. What people want is they want the ability to use old event maps. So, for example, the recent Frost Invasion, Operation Ice event that's gone by, Outpost 32, people want that to be enabled. Now, I don't necessarily agree it should be a sandbox mode feature, but I think it should be an admin mode feature at the very least, like some event maps returning. So I think that's anything from the Solar Eclipse onwards could return to admin mode. I mean, if Rotfield's in the game, then surely, what was it? Totality Tower should be in the game as well. Not entirely sure about anything before 2022. So when it comes to admin mode, what I think is anything beyond the Solar Eclipse update, that being the V1.00 update, I think should be fair game for being re-added to admin mode. This includes enemies, by the way, event enemies. So, for example, some people want the Umbria to return because they want to use the Umbria. Now, if there were a modern enemy to be re-added called the Umbria, and then you would get its logbook, you would be able to get its logbook in Legacy and then spawn in the Umbria. However, this is not the case because there is no modern enemy called the Umbria. This also applies for the Penumbra and even the original Ducky Doom. You can't spawn in the original Ducky Doom because the current logbook that you get is called Ducky Doom the Third. Meanwhile, for the old duck enemies, for example, Flying Ducky, you can spawn that in because there is a current logbook called Flying Ducky. Some people want, with the admin mode Game Pass, to spawn in all the enemies that have been added to the game since at least the Solar Eclipse update. Some people said that it should go back all the way back to 2019, so you should have like the old Swordmaster, for example, or the old Raider boss. However, sorry to break your heart, those enemies are so old that they've actually been removed from the game entirely. Their original code do not exist. That's because in the transition from 2019 TDS to the Mega Update TDS, so full release TDS, those enemies had to be removed because those enemies weren't supported in that code. And actually, in the game's code, all enemies from 2019 still exist, but only from the Mega Update. So, for example, the demon from the 2019 Halloween event still exists without its face. This is because there was an update in 2019, or no, in the Overhaul update where enemies' faces were removed. And actually, it wasn't the Overhaul update that removed it. It was the Frost Invasion update that removed all enemies' faces. And as you can see, the demon, even though it's from 2019, still works, yes. I mean, it has its old walking animation, as seen here. But I can say that all Halloween enemies from 2019 still exist in the game's code, unless they've been rewritten over. For example, I believe the Scarecrow has been rewritten over for another event. So that I don't think you'll be able to spawn in. But certainly, it should be possible that all Halloween 2019 event enemies should be able to be spawned in. So, for example, the Swamp Thing from 2019 should be able to be spawned in. However, because you can't get it through logbooks, it's not possible to do that. Should the developers re-enable this? Actually, I'm not disagreeing with this fact because, I mean, they're in the game. Why not allow people to spawn old event enemies from 2019? There shouldn't be an expectation that these event enemies work, by the way, because they're really old and their abilities are probably very old that they don't actually work properly. But it would be really cool to see old event enemies from 2019 spawning into Tower Defense Simulator, the modern version. As I said previously, 2019 stuff from before the Mega Update, the full release of Tower Defense Simulator, won't be able to work in the modern version. What else? You know, consumables, the event consumables for the Christmas event should be enabled here, for admin mode at least. This feature with admin here, it's really jank. You can't, blacklisting doesn't actually work do anything, and kicking players doesn't actually work as well. I mean, it's not like you can join a server anyways for admin mode and then matchmake for admin mode either, because it doesn't work like that. As for modifiers, there should be a lot more modifiers. So, for example, translated isn't here. Enemies beta is not an option here. HP locked is not an option here. Farm banned is not an option here. Gatling gun banned isn't an option here. I mean, yeah, sure, it's pretty dumb to have a Gatling gun banned or a modifier, and you could just, you know, not equip the Gatling gun. But still, it shows that all modifiers in the game aren't enabled currently in admin mode. And some modifiers that people probably would want in the game, for example, the translator modifier, the classic Roblox modifier, or the April Fool's 2025 modifier, they're not enabled here, which I find really odd. They should be enabled. I mean, the whole bill for admin mode is that you can relive iconic TDS challenges, which is kind of ironic given the fact that some of the only TDS challenges in the game are those from the classic events only. You can't do like the old events for Frost Spirits, Krampus, that's Christmas 2019. You can't do Halloween 2019. All of these maps, they're not in the game. And finally, not really a feature for Sandbox mode, but a feature in the index. These enemies here, they don't have a description, unlike some event enemies. So event enemies do have descriptions, well, certain ones. So for example, the chunky ducky does have an event description, but even the egg rolls, the age egg rolls don't. Now, developers, you promised us that event descriptions or enemy descriptions should be in the game after the new year. It's currently May. Where are they? I'm not saying that this is the top of the priority for the developers, but I'm just saying I could probably easily write some event enemy descriptions for Tower Defense Simulator. I've done it in the past. Below Natural, you know my CV. You know which wikis I've worked for in the past and what I've wrote lore for in the past. I think I could do some in Tower Defense Simulator, and I'll be totally unbiased. I won't make it British in any way whatsoever if you require it. It's just that some people in Tower Defense Simulator really like the lore behind the descriptions for logbooks, so I think it should be done for all of the enemies.